Guy Milliere, you have written a book in French that you're interested to adapt to English now. What's the book and what's the essence of it?
I published 50 books in French, but it will be my second book in English, and more are to come. This one is in some ways very personal because it's the story of what did happen to me when I was 21, and what did happen to me at that time changed my life. I went to Lebanon, pushed by a friend in France. He said to me, "You want to meet real resistors, and you will have to meet people working for the Palestinian cause." And the people I met were murderers, anti-Semitic murderers, and I had to explain what exactly is the Palestinian cause that I discovered then. And I speak in this book about this. I speak about anti-Semitism in Europe, and I speak about what Israel is. And I think that it's especially important to speak about it now because 40, even 50 years later, almost 50 years later now, the situation is the same. You have more and more anti-Semitism in Europe, and the anti-Semitism you have in Europe is mostly now Muslim anti-Semitism, and the same thing is starting to happen in the United States. People don't understand exactly who are the people who created the Palestinian cause, and they don't see that these people are mostly murderers, anti-Semitic murderers who wants to destroy. And if they had the power, they would destroy the Jews, and they would destroy the Jews in Israel, but it would not be enough for them. And many people don't understand what is exactly the situation of Israel. I see that even in the United States you have more and more leftists saying ugly things about Israel, and they need to understand what the situation is before it's too late. We are in a world where anti-Semitism is rising again. It never disappeared, but it's rising again. We are in a world where many people support the Palestinian cause without knowing exactly what it is and what are the people who created this cause. And I have to say that I know it because I met these people. I'm in Lebanon in 1971. I met the people who organized the attack in Munich. 2 years, not even 2 years later. And so I know who are these people. I know the situation in Israel. I know Israel. And I had to tell the truth and how I discovered the truth at that time. A long time ago, but it still marked my life. And I must say that if I moved and if I decided to move and to live in the United States, because now I'm a permanent resident in the United States and I don't want to come back too often to Europe, it's because of what I was doing in France. And what I was doing in France was fighting against anti-Semitism, supporting Israel, and because of that I received many death threats. Yeah. And the death threats were so serious that I thought that for the safety of my family I had to move.
Mm-hmm. And just for the record, in what faith were you raised?
I was a Catholic when I was until when I was a teenager, and I still remember that at school I was told that the Jews killed the Son of God. Mm-hmm. So in Catholicism you have a strong anti-Semitism that has not faded away. And I see that now many Jews are leaving France, for example, almost between 5,000 and 10,000 a year. And if you speak about it to French people, they say it doesn't matter to me. More than it doesn't matter to me.
They don't care. Why?
They don't care because they feel that Jews are troublemakers and they are ready to accept Muslims. And I meet people sometimes in France. They say, "Oh, if my wife has to wear a veil and if it's mandatory, I will accept as long as I can live in peace. And if the Jews leave, maybe we shall have more peace and France will be more peaceful. So I think that many people at the time of World War II had the same kind of reasoning. And I could see that for many years people knew nothing about all this, because when I was at the high school, I was not told anything about what did happen during World War II. And I was at the...
You mean in France?
In France, yes. No, I never.
Did the French...
I discovered what did happen during World War II, what did happen to the Jews, because I met a Jewish woman. I was working in the motion picture industry. I was 20, but I was working in the motion picture industry, and I met a woman who had a blue tattoo on her arm. I didn't know what was this blue tattoo.
What was it a tattoo of?
It was a tattoo that was made in Auschwitz for the Jews.
Number?
That was, numbers.
Numbers?
Numbers, yes.
The Nazis tattooed her number on her?
Yes, exactly. And I didn't know what it was, and she explained to me not only that she was a survivor from Auschwitz, but she explained to me too what did happen to her family, that she had been arrested in Paris by French policemen, that she had been sent to Auschwitz in a French train, and I knew strictly nothing about that. And so when I was 20, I met this woman and I discovered that. And when I was 21, a few months later, I could see that people were dreaming to do the same thing to Jews, this time in Israel, and these people were so-called Palestinians. I met them in the south of Beirut, in the camp called Bor al-Barajneh, and according to me, it was the same kind of people. And I could see that it was the same kind of people than the Nazi, because one of the chief, the Palestinians at that time, thought that I was a supporter of their cause because I had been sent to Beirut by a filmmaker who was working with them. And he made me a proposal. He wanted to give me a gift, and the gift was a copy of Mein Kampf, a French edition, 1938. I said, I have the book in France, and I didn't want to accept the present, but I was really scared by what I heard and by what I saw. And I must say that I knew that the filmmaker and other people in France went to the same place, met the same guys, and knew exactly what they were thinking. They knew that these people were anti-Semites, that they wanted to kill Jews, that they were proud to kill Jews, satisfied to kill Jews, and admired Adolf Hitler. And
well, perhaps this was just a political movement of a fringe group in Lebanon at that time?
No, these people were members of the PLO, and they were leaders of the PLO. And when the driver who brought me there proposed me something a little later, when he brought me back to my hotel, he said to me, "Do you want to meet Abu Ammar?" I said, "I don't know who is Abu Ammar." I was only 21, so I knew nothing. He said to me, "Abu Ammar is the name of our chief, and the name you use for our chief in Europe is Yasser Arafat." And I said to him, "Why do you call him Abu Ammar?" They said to me, "It's his name of war." And it's a name he chose because Ammar was a companion of the Prophet. Companion of Muhammad. So it's a name of jihad. And so when later I heard people in France saying to me, but Yasser Arafat is secular, he's not Muslim at all. I said it's not true, but they didn't want to hear me.
I see. Do you feel that this sentiment that they had at that time was purely a political struggle over land?
No, not at all. Not at all. It's not a struggle over land. It's an Islamic struggle that they hide. They say we are secular. We fight to free our land. No, not at all. They think that the territory of the Middle East is a part of what they call Dar al-Islam, and they think that when a territory has been conquered by Muslims, it has to be a territory that belongs to Muslims for forever, for the rest of the history, for the rest of the time, and that it's a crime to try to take back the territory that has been conquered by Islam from them.
So maybe this applies only to Palestine, or does it also apply in Europe?
It applies to every territory that has been conquered by the Muslims.
Spain?
Yes, for example, if you look at the maps, if you look at the map used by the so-called Palestinians, I say so-called Palestinians because you find no trace of Palestinians anywhere in a book before the end of the 1960s. And so even the people who are now called Palestinians had to learn that they are Palestinians. They didn't know it. If you look at reports made by TVs in 1967, at the end of 1967, these people say we are Jordanians. We wouldn't know what will happen to us, but we are Jordanians. We are citizens of Jordan. And so they are not Palestinians. They had to learn later that they were Palestinians. So they were indoctrinated to learn that they were Palestinians, and everyone can know the real history. And I could say that the Palestinian cause, and that's what I say in the book, is a double crime against humanity. It's a crime against humanity against Jews. Because these people want to kill as many Jews as they can. It's a kind of slow Shoah they want to organize, and it's a crime against Arabs because they transform Arab by brainwashing in criminals, in killers. In killers of Jews. And so when I meet someone in France, when someone says to me they are resistors, I say no, they are killers of Jews. And people are upset when I say that, but what I say is the truth. When I was in Beirut, they showed me pictures of Jews that they had killed, because they take pictures sometimes when they kill Jews, and they are proud to do it. And I must say that on the arm of the man that they had killed, I could see the same tattoo than the tattoo I could see on the arm of the woman I met in Paris. So I said to myself, this man survived from Auschwitz, but he was killed by people who admire Adolf Hitler in the Middle East. And according to me, it was really awful, and it was so disgusting that in the evening of that day, I couldn't eat. I had to take a very long shower, and I explained it in the book. I thought that I met people who are the same kind of people that the people who are killers of Jews in Auschwitz.
Islamo-Nazis.
Exactly.
Is it unreasonable to refer to this element as Islamo-Nazi?
No, I think that it's right. It's right. They are Islamist, and they admire Nazi.
Is this how prominent or how common is this sentiment among Muslims in Europe today?
I think that it's very common, and I must say that before I left Europe, my wife is Muslim born, and she still has a Muslim first name. So sometimes she could meet parents of children at the end of the high school, for example, every day. And she was speaking with Muslim parents. And what they were saying was exactly that. They despise Jews, and they think that Hitler did a good job, but did not finish the job, that some other people have to finish the job. And I know that many Muslims in Europe thinks like that. I could see it. And I must say that in the high school where one of my daughter was living, before we left, in the high school, in the suburbs where we were living, there was only one Jewish student. And she was harassed all the time. My daughter didn't say it to me because she said, maybe if I said it to you before, you would have spoken about that at the high school, and I would have had big troubles. So even my daughter was scared to speak about what could happen to Jewish children in the French high schools.
What have you titled this book? How have you?
It's called Israel Told to My Daughter, and because I wanted to explain everything to my daughter, I knew that my daughter was brainwashed in the French high school system. She was pushed to think that Palestinians were the good guys, that Israel was a despicable country, and she was not told anything about anti-Semitism. Or when the teachers spoke about anti-Semitism, they were speaking only about Nazi anti-Semitism. They were never speaking about the anti-Semites who killed Jews now in France, and many Jews have been killed. 12, 13 Jews have been killed in France. Right. All of them have been killed by Muslims, radicalized Muslims, and nobody speaks about Muslim anti-Semitism. It's necessary to speak about Muslim anti-Semitism and to say that anti-Zionism, what they call anti-Zionism, hatred against Israel, is part of anti-Semitism, part of Muslim anti-Semitism.
So there, in addition to a Muslim-Jew hatred, there's also in Islam a hatred of Christianity, and we see this acted out in the Middle East, yes, in Iraq, in Egypt, in Africa, Nigeria, throughout Africa, yes. In the same way that the National Socialist Nazis rose to power using anti-Semitism, but then wound up becoming totalitarian rulers against all people who opposed them. Do you see a similarity now in this Islamo-Marxist, Islamo-leftist movement?
Yes, exactly. I think that the leftists make common cause with the Muslims because the leftists want to destroy Western civilization. And they know that the Muslims want to destroy Western civilization too. So they say, if we help Muslims, they will make the destruction for us, and afterwards we shall take the power. They don't see that when the Muslims will have the power, if they have the power, they will destroy them, and they wouldn't care if they help them. And you can see that everywhere where you have Islam, the Christians are destroyed. And the Muslim don't care if a Christian is a leftist or not. Even if a leftist say, I'm not a Christian at all, for Muslims, they are Christians. Or if they have no God, it's even worse. Because if you read the Quran, you see that under Muslims, you have people who are unbelievers, and unbelievers are Christians and Jews. But under unbelievers, you have people who say, I have no religion at all. And these people must be killed. It's written in the Quran. And so the leftists who help Islamists to gain power don't see that they commit a kind of suicide.
Suicide for their culture.
Suicide for their culture, but for them too, because they will not be the first to be killed, maybe, but they will be killed one day later.
You published this book recently in France. What would you like to see happen now?
You mean in France or here?
Well, no, yeah, I'm sorry. In the French language, you published it. It exists now in French. What's your goal today?
My goal in France is with this book in France. My goal
in French.
Yes, my goal was to explain what was happening, what was the truth, yes, to the people who read the book, yes, and I want to do the same thing in the U.S. now, because I think that it's important. I see that what did happen in France and in Europe is slowly happening here. Yes. You had Jews killed in New York, yes, and in the area of New York, yes, and you could see that these Jews were not killed by what leftists in the U.S. call white supremacists. Not a single of them was killed by a white suprematist. And I think that it's necessary to open the eyes of the people and to explain what is the aim of anti-Semitism, that you have a new anti-Semitism, that there is a strong Muslim anti-Semitism, and that the difference between most rightist anti-Semitism and not only leftist, but mostly Muslim anti-Semite, is that Muslim anti-Semite kill. I could say that rightist anti-Semite mostly insult. It's bad to insult, but it's worse to be killed than to be insulted.
If people wanted to follow the availability of the translated book into English, what website would they find you at?
I write articles for the Gatestone Institute in English, and it's mostly on the Gatestone Institute that I write. In French, I write on many websites. The main one is called Drauz, D-R-A-U-Z.
.info?
Yeah, exactly.
.info?
Yes.
Okay.
Okay.
Thank you very much.
You're very welcome.
Okay. Let's see how long it went. 21 minutes.
Yes, I thought that it was longer than 10 minutes.